So I'll call the February 11th, 2020 Public Works Board meeting to order. Misty, can you take the roll call, please?
Ms. Schmidt? Here. Mr. Temperley?
Here.
Mr. Pickard?
Here.
Mr. Lair?
Here.
Up next is the correction and approval of the minutes of December 10th, 2019. I might entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I don't-
minutes
I don't
from
think
December.
you can. Were you here at that meeting?
Yeah.
Oh,
That was where we were talking about the Plat subdivision.
that's right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
We have a motion.
I like the
Second.
challenge.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
think we need to make a correction.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going too fast.
In the body of the minutes, it talks about comments from the council. It probably should say Public Works Board.
Ooh, which section is that?
I don't know, I haven't got it pulled up.
Um,
I'll get to it as quick as I can.
Oh, discussion and recommendation and the yeah. You get that, Misty?
Yes, I see that.
So change from council to board.
Sorry.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Is there an understanding that the motion to approve includes that amendment?
A correction.
Yeah, correction?
Correction.
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. All right. So all in favor of the minutes with the correction, say aye.
Aye.
Gonna oppose, so. All right, thanks, Vicki, for spotting that. Questions and public comment? No? Director of Public Works report.
Okay, excuse me, I just want to give you an update on a few things that we're working on. Some of these, quite honestly, will be, there's nothing to report, but I want to keep everything in front of you, so let's jump right into it. We're doing our AMI installations yet. We've got, as of today, we've got about 1,400 electric meters installed and about 900, water meters installed. We're making okay progress. This is the time of the year that we really want to hit on it, and so we're probably averaging on the water side 2 or 3 a day for 3 or 4 days out of the week. On the electric side, much easier to do, and so they're moving much faster there. But that's moving along pretty good. We're hoping to pick it up a little bit more. And I'll just pause in case you've got questions on that one.
No?
All right. The electric billing audit, the Public Service Commission audits every electric utility on a regular basis. It just happens to be our turn again. And so they initially send out a questionnaire with 28 questions on it that just talk about our policies and our procedures, et cetera. And that was due yesterday, so we sent it in, and now we kind of wait to see what other questions and concerns they have and if there's any corrective action that we have to take. This is one of the advantages here of being a WPPI Energy member, in that every WPPI member does pretty much everything the same way. And so the PSC will see a list of answers that they've probably seen many, many, many times already. And hopefully that will help us get through this pretty easily.
How long does that process usually take?
The last time we went through it, it was probably, I'm going to guess 2 or 3 months. I'm anticipating it's a little longer now, just because the PSC does things on a little longer time frame now. Yeah, so I'm guessing on that one.
That's all.
Yeah. The electric primary extension work in Brookstone is done, and so what we did is basically start on Crestview and put a loop in that covers all the new lots that are going into Brookstone. And what we will do, now that's the main primary extension. What we will do now is use our own crews to go from the primary extension up the streets into where we make the secondary connections and that sort of thing. So, go ahead,
And the
Steve.
electric extension covers all 76 lots, not just the 21 that were built this year.
So that is ready to go. Public Works, we are in the process of revamping, upgrading, however you want to look at it, our street use permit or a street excavation permit. We've had more and more issues over the last few years where contractors, companies, whomever come in and they need to do street work, and they dig up our streets and then they take off, and our streets are not really replaced the way they should be. And so, and there's other issues involved in this, just, parking different vehicles on the street, different activities that different contractors have to do, and they use the street for it. So we're really taking a good comprehensive look at how we permit that, how we can recoup some of our costs for the damage that's done, and how we can make sure the contractor comes back to do the job the way it's supposed to be done. You will be hearing more about this in the coming months as we kind of get things together on this. And the only other thing I'll say here, and maybe Steve has got some other comments, that this is unfortunately not uncommon. It's becoming more and more of an issue in other cities as well. And so it's time that we get a hold of it and make sure our streets are repaired properly.
And this includes sidewalks too.
Yes,
Yeah, it's kind of the right of way.
it's the whole right-of-way.
Right.
It includes a tree lawn, trees,
Right.
curb, pavement. It includes people storing stuff in the right-of-way. It includes people, using dumpsters in the right-of-way, moving pods in the right-of-way.
Leaving piles of crushed stone or whatever in the right of way.
Yes, using it as their storage site
Yeah.
for their contracting work, and then running their skid steers up and down the street, and using the back of the curb as their stop, and,
Yeah.
it's taking a very, very comprehensive view of the use of the right-of-way. It talks about, if you go in and you dig and you damage trees, what the expectation for, replacing the tree. If you have to trim a tree, you have to have it inspected before you leave by the forester. So it takes a much more comprehensive view. It also tells you how you have to repair the pavement after you're done. A lot of these guys just throw a little cold mix in it and see, this is no longer going to be an option.
Without getting into the weeds too much, is it more related to policy and procedure or more related to oversight and time?
Let's put it this way. Our first experience came this year when someone went and asked one of our city staff went and asked the contractor if he had a permit to be doing what he was doing in the right-of-way, and he said yes. And by the time he found out that nobody in the city had issued this guy a permit, he was gone. And so it was process and oversight together, because it was like who was responsible for that and then who was checking in on it. So it goes through a whole set of processes now where we're going to do the same thing we do with the zoning permits. What we were experiencing is that people were submitting all these building permits, and we would find that many of them had some type of easement in their property that wasn't being reviewed, and so we were having garages and homes and fences built in through the electric lines or the stormwater lines or some other type of easement. And so we now have it where all the permits are put into a tracker. That tracker sent out to all the department heads. They all have their opportunity to comment. This will kind of be done the same way. But there's one person who issues the permit, and he's the one who tracks it. And that's the NSO officer, or the NS officer.
Yes. And the other point I'll make really quick is that we have not tracked costs associated with having to go back and re-repair, if you will. But the time alone, we know is it's costing us money. I don't know how much, but it's costing us money, and so we need to go after this. All right, next item I've got is the corrosion control study, and as you recall, this is related to the lead service line issues, and the study is designed to find out what it is that we can add to the water that will help or will prevent lead leaching into the water lines. We went through everything that the DNR asked us to do, and we submitted our report in December on time. And now we are waiting for their response. And we've been told that they typically have 90 days to respond, and we assume they're going to take all 90 days. One thing that we asked for in that study was to be able to do another 6 months of studying, because the results we got were not conclusive, but they were starting to trend more toward a different option for what we add. And if you remember, we were talking about polyphosphates and orthophosphates. And initially, it looked like what we were doing now, or the current status, was working quite well. But toward the end, it started looking like going to almost 100% orthophosphate was more effective. So we want to make sure, before they require any changes or we do anything different, that we've got good data. So we're kind of in a limbo on that one. It's in the DNR's hand right now. We are continuing to take all the tests that we normally would and monitor the results. And it wouldn't surprise me a bit if the DNR takes their time to review it and then comes back and says, why don't you go ahead and do another 3 months, because we've already done 3 more above what we were going to do anyway. So, any questions on that one? All right, lead service line, similar situation. At the end of last year, we submitted all the reports. We completed all the work that we could do in that year. We used all the grant money. I should say we committed all the grant money. There's a couple of places that are waiting for spring to get in and actually repair or replace their lead service lines. But as with the corrosion control study now, we're just kind of waiting on what next steps the DNR is going to ask us to do. What we anticipate is that there will be a modification to the number of lead service lines that have to be replaced every year. We were under an order to do a minimum of 7% of all the known lead service lines. We are way ahead of that. We far exceeded how many we would have to do over the last several years. And so now we're waiting to see how they want to do it. They, meaning the DNR. One of the things that will likely come up is whether or not we will require people to replace lead service lines, known lead service lines. And so there will be considerable discussion about whether or not that's a requirement or it's up to the homeowner to make that decision as to whether or not they want to do that. So that's a preview of a discussion that may or may not come, but odds are much better it will come than not. Next one is the radium issue. This is something that came up last year. Well number 4 was shown to have a slightly higher average radium reading than is allowed, the minimum requirement, or the minimum MCL, minimum contaminant level. Thank you very much. We were going to take care of this late last year, but the weather turned cold early, and we decided we don't want to have one of our wells down at that particular time. And so we contacted the DNR, asked if we could move it to spring, and they consented, and now we have to have that done, I believe, by May 15th. So we'll keep moving on that. As you recall, we submitted a rate adjustment to the Public Service Commission. We had hoped to have everything in place and ready to go by the beginning of February, but we submitted all of our data, all of our information, I think we're in a couple of months ago now, and have heard nothing back from the PSC. The only actual information we got is that initially they were telling water systems to expect about 180 days before a decision is made, and then we got an email indicating that maybe we should wait close to 200 days, and so they're lengthening out that. And I think there's 2 reasons. One is that the PSC is asking for considerably more information than they ever had in the past, and so they have more information to go through, and they're being much more particular, much more providing much more oversight to the information that we send in. We initially answered, I think, about 6 pages of questions that they had after we originally submitted this, and Mark probably knows more about this. And then they sent back another request, and I think that was 3 pages long. Now, we haven't heard from them since then, so hopefully they've got everything they need. But I would not anticipate any kind of adjustment Boy, if it's in March, I'd be surprised, probably looking at April more realistically. And then the last thing I've got on my list is at the wastewater treatment plant, where we're putting together a facilities plan. And basically, this is a long-range plan as to, what kind of equipment is going to be needing replacement? Is there going to be a need for expansion, that sort of thing? And it's just an exercise that we have to go through on a regular basis. And then, of course, as we've talked about, our plant is really probably close to the end of its life. And so this will be a very important facilities plan as to whether or not what we've got there can simply be added to and expanded and updated, or if we're going to be looking at some other options. But we're actually having our first meeting in this regard yet this week, and then we'll start to get a little bit more information on where we're going with that.
How often do you go through that exercise for the treatment plant?
I think if I remember, this will be the second time since I've been here, and I've been here about 12 or 13 years. So
Yeah.
it's probably five years or so we
I
do.
believe it's 5 years because I think it's related to our permit. And
That's
I think
probably
that's
right.
every 5 years.
So that's what I've got.
No more questions? All right, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Item number 6, discussion and recommendation and final plat construction plans, Tyranena Point Subdivision, Parcel 246, 0713, 2423, 003. And I think we have a prepared motion, so let's get that, a motion for that, so we can get the discussion started. So I entertain a motion to approve motion 20-2-1. No motion?
Give me a minute.
Oh.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. Who wants to lead us in this? We had a preliminary discussion a few meetings ago, and this is final. So who wants to start us out here?
These are the construction plans for the subdivision, so they're going to go through all the information related to stormwater, water, sanitary sewer, and street construction. Brandon provided a memo where he discussed some of the issues in the development. And do you want to make any other comments? Most of the subdivision is, well, all the subdivision is built to city standard, so it's standard water, sewer, stormwater, pavement types, street widths, sidewalks. Couple of small issues related to stormwater and that there's no real outlet. So all the water currently runs into a wetlands site, so the stormwater detention basin is designed to handle that. And then there's, if there's at the overflow rate, it pushes into that wetlands, and that at some point it starts pushing back and then flows out to the southwest, along, kind of off of Mud Lake Road. Probably the biggest issue that we've been discussing related to this site is water pressure. And so you'll probably see a ton of details on the water pressure. The road grades are more in line with what we expected. So we're down to 8%, steepest. So that's pretty much in keeping with what we had discussed we wanted, what the code currently says. Although it does allow up to 10%, they have accommodated and gone to 8. The highest point in the city is currently 884 for houses. Here, the highest point's going to be 902, and potentially in the future part of the developments, it could go as high as 908. So you're looking at water pressures at the site that are going to be around 40, maybe even lower, maybe as low as 37. The law doesn't allow it to go any lower than 35. And when we say 37,
When you say the law doesn't allow it to go under 35, that's, the nominal pressure is not allowed to be under 35, not any given time of any given day, correct?
right,
So if somebody out there says at some point in the time, hey, my water pressure is lower than 35, that's not an issue.
No.
It's an average or
It-
nominal thing, right?
you can't go below 20.
Okay.
So if they're below 20, then yeah, you're going to get a call that says, hey, 35 is the nominal. This 37 is looking at when the water tower is, and it's either 82 or,
So the 37 was when the water tower, so the DNR, when he says the law, he's talking about the DNR NR codes for public water systems. And that says that under normal operating conditions, the pressure at ground level, like above the water main, can't be lower than 35 PSI. And so there was some discussion on how do you define normal operating conditions. And the city's water tower, the SCADA set points for how it fills is it fluctuates typically between 81% full and 75% full. And so 75% is the low end or the low pressure end of like normal operating range. The city also looked into how often that tower has fallen below 75% full in the last, I don't know, what was that, 10 years or so? And it's very seldom. I mean, it was like under a half a dozen times in 10 years or something like that, if I remember right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, we kind of came to the conclusion that using that 75% full was very defensively your normal operating conditions. And so use that 75% full, translated it into an actual elevation of water in the tank, and then what that would mean for pressures in this subdivision. And some of the higher end lots, there's 2 lots proposed that on the current plans had what appears to be a finished floor elevation of 908, or a building elevation 908. And Corey from Loose Homes is here if you want to ask any more details, I'd suppose. And then 2 that were 902. And so the water pressure at the 908 lots would be in about that 37 PSI range under just static pressure for that 75% full in the tower. And so maybe what Mark was getting at is, that static pressure. If you had a fire or some large draw in the system nearby.
Or a Super Bowl commercial, right?
That pressure would drop. And another thing that's important to note is 37, 40 PSI is pretty low compared to what people typically expect to see in a house. I'd say it's more normal to have 50s, 60s, 70s. The 884 range, it's, if 902 is 40 PSI, it's 2.31 feet per PSI, so 884 would be another 8 or 9 PSI, something like that. So you'd be at almost 50 PSI for the current high spot in the city. So it's just, we want to make people aware that there's somewhat of a decision to be had here on whether the city wants to require any sort of water pressure boosting systems. by the letter of the law, we don't think that you need to, but from like a quality of operation type thing,
Yeah, but
potentially want to.
people will come complain to us later and expect action. I've seen that in Brookstone with some stormwater issues in basements where they thought the city was responsible since we approved the stormwater runoff plans. Right.
Even though they modified the stormwater system substantially by regrading their yards and placing trees and buildings and fences in them,
Yeah, but
Yes.
they
So
still, yeah,
we still denied it.
right.
We did participate in a special assessment project that Brookstone ultimately paid for them. But yeah, yes, that happens a lot. I've seen Meadow Ridge Court. We did those private streets. They, on a regular basis, ask us if we take those streets over. There are all these things that we end up, yes, people will come back and complain in some form or fashion about something that was approved in the development, was part of the original project plan, that now they don't find to be typical.
I think another important thing to note is these pressures we're talking about, 37, 40 PSI, that's at ground level. So if you had a second-story shower head that might be 7 feet off the ground in the second story, that shower head's going to see quite low water pressure compared to what people would normally expect. And the options that the city would have, the DNR code, the NR code allows up to 10 in-home booster systems before they make you have a larger, higher, different pressure zone. And so right now, in this current plat, there maybe be, if there's 4 lots that kind of get down near that 40 or below PSI. But in any future phase to the east, kind of closer to the higher end of the hill there, there's a good chance that you would be going over that 10 limit, unless the grading was done very specifically to drop a lot of lots down or to try and hit that 10 limit. But the other option is you can put in a pressure zone booster system that would, say, boost this whole subdivision currently and future development into more normal ranges. And that's an option, but of course that comes with additional expense and long-term maintenance. And it's just another component to the water system to be maintained and kind of worry about, if you will. I guess these are all just things to be aware of. That do you have to do anything? Probably not, but there may be some concerns, like you said, with people coming later and.
Right. So if we don't do it, if people do complain later, who's going to pay for the booster then? Can we special assess that to the subdivision, or?
I imagine we could special assess it. I don't know that you either want to think about it now or think about passing on it. I mean, if they come in and they say, well, we have to have it and we're willing to be special assessed, I suppose that we could do that. But it's probably better to think about it now. Like one of the things we thought about was, well, limiting it to a first floor, one floor, not a 2-story home. You throw that on the covenants or throw that in the plat. But that, again, this is all at first floor 40. So how much boosting are you going to do then? In-home boosters they are a nightmare waiting to happen because you're working in somebody's home. And you're responsible, the water system's responsible
Yeah,
for
very important to
maintaining it.
know. Yep. By the NR code, those in-home booster systems are owned and operated by the water utility.
So if somebody says, oh, I'd like higher pressure in my shower, can a homeowner install a booster? And if so, whose responsibility is it to maintain it?
Well, I think if a homeowner does it on their own,
Right.
that's theirs. But if we're doing it because you have to meet regulatory requirements, or the city, wants to because it's getting real close to that 35 PSI limit, then it would be on the city.
But do we need to do the whole subdivision? Can we start at some point within the subdivision?
And how many future lots will have this elevation issue as the build-out continues?
We don't have any grading. I mean, we've got one hypothetical road profile for the future phase, but we don't have any grade. I would say I did a count, 12 to 15. You know, if you kind of overlay the potential lot layout with the existing ground contours and kind of how they were cutting down this current phase, it would be, I don't know if Corey wants to add, but it'd be, a dozen or more, I'd say, would be concerned.
So what's the cost of grading so that this isn't an issue versus the cost of a booster system?
Well, they almost automatically have to cut a good chunk off the top of some of that hill, because to get a road up and over, it's just too steep. So they're already showing cutting the hill down quite a bit in this phase, and that future phase would continue that cut.
But not to the level that would necessarily
Right.
solve this
It
issue,
works for street grades, but it doesn't necessarily solve all the water problems.
Yeah.
unless further grading was done.
I think the city has the authority to require any developer to make it happen, that the infrastructure is going to work, rather than us as a utility taking on that responsibility ourselves. I think the onus is on the developer, and that we shouldn't be approving anything until they can show us that it's going to work.
Well, they can show us that it's going to work with a pressure system or in-home systems or,
But isn't that in-home system our responsibility then?
yes, so would be the other one, the system one or the in-home ones are theoretically our responsibility.
Well, shouldn't it be the developer's responsibility to make the development happen where that's not a requirement?
Well, I guess what you're looking at is not all the times does your infrastructure meet the needs of the elevations and structures within the city, so how could you do that? I'm not going to oppose, but what you're looking at here is, if you look at this subdivision and you're looking at it from the west-east, there's already a 13-foot cut into the hill, so if you're on the back end, it goes up like this. So if you're cutting off more of the hill, that's a pretty substantial issue, so yes, we could make them cut more of the hill off. It makes it a very difficult project at this point.
Or we require the developer pay for a booster system for serving this development.
Yes, which we would do. We're not going to pay for it. We would have to maintain it though, and that's but we maintain the system that they give us otherwise. This is just a little bit more of it's kind of like getting a lift station in a wastewater treatment in the wastewater system.
So you're talking about a system that isn't an in-home one, but it's one that serves the development?
Yes, and you could put it so that it serves the whole development. You could put it so that it serves the 10 or 15 lots that we think are going to be at the top.
Well, from the city's perspective, it doesn't make sense to have a small one and then another small one, because that adds to our maintenance costs.
Right.
You have to stand up there so I can hear you. Who are you? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I need a motion to suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
All right.
Vote.
Oh, vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi there, Corey O'Donnell, Graymar LLC. We're the developer here proposing the subject to the property here, the 43 lots. We've been reviewing the water booster stations and had some preliminary conversations with the city. And the future development is currently in the town of Lake Mills. And the city had asked for us to master plan and put together a layout that we think might make sense in the future for that area and what the infrastructure needs may be. We did look at that and put together a preliminary plan for it. The majority of the elevation changes are actually off-site of our property, and they're inclusive of this town parcel. So we were thinking that, yes, there is a potential for a booster station that might be necessary for that parcel. But we felt that that would be negotiated in with the current landowner as far as the value of their property and the infrastructure that would be needed to service that parcel. So this particular development, this particular project, we envisioned maybe needing 2 or maybe needing 4 potential individual booster stations for those lots that might not get the water pressure that they needed, but not necessarily a water booster station for the entire subdivision. The majority of the lots, it appears, can be serviced with the water pressure that is required per the NR code. And then looking at the elevations for the last couple of lots that may need the water booster, I believe it's at ground elevation above the water main. And I think that the street elevation actually is 2 to 4 feet below where that finished floor is in the house. So is that what they actually use for the PSI calculation? So like, as an example, like lots 31 and 28 have a yard grade at 908, but the street's actually like 904 and 902 where the water lateral would service it. So not that it's a huge number, but it is, 1 to 2 PSI stronger. And then I guess the second comment, as you restrict that water, you go from your large main into your 1.5-inch service into the house, doesn't that also increase pressure?
No,
No?
not static
Not
pressure.
static
Not
pressure,
static.
no. You are correct that the NR code references the ground elevation above the water pipe, which would be in the terrace. But again, like if the
Yeah.
terrace was 2 feet lower, you're talking less than 1 PSI. But, and, I think to what Vicky was saying earlier, proving that things work, how do you define what works? Because, the pressures here would likely be above 35 PSI, but from like a quality of use standpoint for the houses,
Sure.
is it great? Probably not.
Well, and the other thing we can look at too is if we have individual booster pressure systems for those couple of lots, we can also work with our engineer and see if we can shave off a couple feet on those individual lots as well to get the best optimal conditions on those several lots. But, we're envisioning individual water boosters on 2 to 4 lots as opposed to a water booster for the entire subdivision, because the infrastructure really is there for the next development, if and when that would happen. We're envisioning 43 lots here with a build-out over 7 years, which is a pretty lengthy time for us to get through the lots. And then we're talking about infrastructure needs for, the town, if it does come into the city, for a more of a booster station for the entire area then. And then could the individual booster stations be taken offline and be part of the grand booster station if it's brought in for future development?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd say that's possible.
That's fine, but that's a restructuring, there's a restructuring cost associated with that, I'm sure.
Well,
To
right.
redo something that's already done, you have to, you put in a main that goes the opposite direction or put the booster station in this area. Let's think about that now, how that would be retrofitted rather than push it down the road. Because I understand, yeah, that's in the town, that's going to happen, that's not this parcel, but, okay, let's say that development does occur 7, 10 years from now, and then these 2 or 4 people say, hey, I want to get added to that booster system.
Well, right.
Then
What I've seen
let's
done-
figure that out now rather than
Sure.
later.
What I've seen done in that situation in the past is that in the developer's agreement with that development project, the onus for making those corrections would be put into that developer's agreement, and it would be placed on the developer as an obligation to take care of.
So the future developer, not you, would be paying for those changes?
Well, the developer that would need the infrastructure necessary to service the global area would be the one that would be responsible for the cost.
Including the cost of retrofitting
Correct, yes.
your area?
Well, retrofitting what currently works and gets the PSI that's needed. But in a grand scheme of things, rather than having smaller systems, the large one would be beneficial, but not necessary in this particular development.
Could some kind of a long-term bond be posted to cover the cost of retrofitting it for in the future?
Well, what if it never develops, though? When would that bond disappear?
I thought we could set time limits on it, like 20 years.
perhaps.
Yeah,
Um,
I thought we'd done that before.
Is there the control of this subdivision, the ownership of this subdivision, isn't at all related to this future expansion that could take place that's in the town now? They're not the same owner?
Well, we have a contractual contract with the current landowner that if we get the approvals necessary, that we would move forward and purchase the property and develop it. So then it would be a negotiation again with the existing landowner or the different landowner that's there to develop
So
that
it's
parcel.
two different, specifically two different landowners, the future one and then the current one?
There's different ownership groups in it, yes.
Okay.
One is Chason, and the other one is the trust.
Oh, so there is a relationship between the two
There
owners?
is a relationship between the two, but I would say one's much more aggressive than the other one.
Well, for the future one to develop, they would have to annex, right? So couldn't then that be a condition on the annexation for that future development to occur? That we could take care of it at that time?
I think the debate is more along the lines of, if it develops, we're going to capture it one way or the other.
Okay,
Because we don't have to, same as this conversation right now. If we want to force them to have a zone in now, we can tell them that we need that. If we, in the future, if they bring in that future development, we're going to say, hey, in order to be able to continue this development, you're going to have to structure this pressure zone from this point to this point.
and that you're going to have to retrofit the ones that were already developed that now need it?
Yes, and from his standpoint, he's going to be looking at another 10 to 13 lots that are going to need it, roughly at least 8 to 12. So you're looking at a situation where, yes, he's going to be more interested in saying, okay, yes, I'm willing to do that. And he's coming in to dig anyways for the future development, running down the street, cutting a water main and adding that isn't a substantial amount of change in the future. Probably the biggest issue is going to be, some kind of agreement with the homeowners to take out or how they're going to handle that future in-home pressures.
Maybe that could be handled through the covenants in this first development.
And maybe the homeowners want to keep it.
So, okay, so it can be worked out for a future development.
Yes.
All right, sorry.
Thank you.
Do we want to talk about on this section here? So I guess a few noteworthy points from my perspective is that this development is providing a stormwater basin that would provide the stormwater quality and quantity treatment for the proposed subdivision as well as the Mud Lake Road project, which is the next agenda item. So both of those would kind of flow into this basin. The basin's proposed to be a wet cell that would then overflow into an infiltration basin. And as Steve was talking about earlier, the developer's engineer has ran some watershed modeling to make sure that this area doesn't, large storm events like a 100-year storm event negatively impact some of there's a couple of houses up near the corner of Mud Lake Road and 89 that are technically still in town, and then they would remain, those wouldn't be impacted because it is an internally draining area that there's an existing wetland there that's kind of down in a kettle, and then stormwater basins would be kind of carved into the hillside adjacent to that, and there's not a great outlet for that area until the water gets pretty high. This might be jumping slightly into the next agenda item, but we are proposing a very high water level overflow pipe out of the Mud Lake Road storm sewer system, which would then flow to the southwest. But water would really only use that in like really large storm events. But we can talk more about that later.
So this is the infiltration basin right here, the first part. No, this is the wet basin.
Wet basin, yeah.
This is then the infiltration basin. At what level does this one overflow into there? 883 or 884?
Hold on a second.
854. So then the water, at the same time, the water is going to start backing up and flowing out of the pipe here and into this ditch over here and then out in this direction here. So,
That overflow in that intersection is an underground, inside of a manhole type of
yes,
system?
it's a pipe, there's a manhole, and then there's a pipe at a higher level inside of it that flows
Right.
out that. And when the water backs up enough in that pipe, it flows out that other direction.
Mhm.
And everything in this area, will start to back up. And as it starts to overflow here, it also get to the point where it starts to overflow here. We don't want to fill this area up in here too much.
And
It's going to fill to a certain level, but
so the plan is that all the water, all the runoff from this development is contained within this detention area, except for
Really
very
big
large
events.
50, 100-year type events.
100-year or more.
Yeah,
And so that pipe is acting more as an emergency for that
right. And then there's a-
very large storm.
and then there's a backup for the emergency pipe.
Yes. And, and this is a kind of an unusual situation at this development event. There's a nice flow that runs out this way out towards Mud Lake. But currently, all the water in this development flows to this point right here. And there's no outlet for it anywhere.
Mhm.
It's kind of a kettle, and it's just held it. Now, we're releasing it into there at the same rate it historically had been released. But because of those houses there, we wanted to make sure that there were alternate methods. And ultimately, I think the stormwater is going to flow out this way as that west side of Mud Lake Road develops.
Another couple of things, the water mains, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer location sizes have all been kind of coordinated between the Mud Lake Road project and the subdivision here. So the connection points to Mud Lake Road, I guess, hopefully, I mean, they do now. They match up with how the Mud Lake Road plans are showing it. So I just wanted to note that has been coordinated, and that's kind of what the memo said, is that there's a few comments compared to if this had just kind of showed up, because there's been some pretty extensive coordination.
And the Mud Lake Road coordinates with the South Main Street.
Correct, yeah.
Your number 6 regarding the grade for lots 32 and 33. Is there any changes on that since you wrote your memo?
Not that I'm aware of. That was the comment that referenced 32 and 33 are just north of the intersection of Tyranena Terrace and the future Unshaven Lane. I don't know if you can point at that, Steve. Yeah, those two lots on either side there. That the current grading there is kind of shown just doing some kind of match slope type grading versus road elevation grading. And there had been some discussion about doing some grading easements on those lots to make sure that the homeowners that would build there are aware that there would be future impacts to their lots when that road got pushed through. That they should be putting, fences and all kinds of plantings tight to their property line.
So is this development that road to the western border?
No, they would cut it off, they're proposing at least to cut it off right there at that intersection right there. And so if you were to extend that road up on the page there, the grade lines shown don't match what the
Right.
future road grade would be. So that whole right-of-way would kind of drop, and then you'd have to match back out into the lots, and so that's what the grading easements would be for, is so that, 10 years from now, or whenever that road might go through, those people aren't shocked to find that we got to tear up their yard pretty good to match down to this future road.
And that regrading and future road building will be the responsibility of the future developer?
Yes, it will not be built by us. It would be a developer that continued it in the future.
So who owns that right of way?
It would eventually be dedicated to the city.
But we don't want to dedicate it yet, right?
The unfinished portion certainly wouldn't. The city wouldn't accept an unfinished portion of
Right,
dedicated.
okay, all right.
We accepted all of Pinnacle in 1994,
Doesn't mean it was right?
but we have done it.
Yeah.
In this situation, we've done road reservations on plats as opposed to actually dedication for this very reason that it's available for the city if it's not included.
I don't know that it makes a difference, because what we do is we don't build on them. And if someone wants to continue to develop lots, they put in the infrastructure. We do not unless it's, we're highly motivated, and then we would special assess anyways.
Haven't you owned road right-of-ways in the past that were just
We've-
forgotten about?
We've
like-
had a lot of road right-of-ways. We had Wakeman, we had
Cove.
a lot of them in
Culver.
the
There's been,
development there.
there's been a lot of roads that are just not improved, but they're official right-of-ways and officially driven on. I drove on a gravel section for a long time to work.
We had Pinnacle was dedicated to us for 20 years.
But we didn't accept the improvements until they were completed.
Right, but that's what I'm saying here is that you're not going to accept the public infrastructure. Well, they're not building any. So when
Right.
they build it, they'll build it on there, and
But they're still giving you a right-of-way, right? So the homeowners don't build playground equipment on it, right?
It'll be platted reserved, as Corey
Okay,
said. That's
all
his
right.
suggestion.
either way, it's fine.
All right.
And the intention with this is to allow flexibility in the future with
Yeah.
this, with the grades that are to be experienced to the east.
Are you okay with that, Mark?
Steve, could you just point to the 2 to 4 lots that have the water elevation issue?
I think you're looking up here.
Those 4 in the, on top of that?
Farthest up on the page.
Yeah,
So it's the 4 lots in the upper right corner?
Correct.
So I'm going to ask this question of Brandon. If those 4 lots were fed from a future pressure zone from the top, which I think is west, correct?
East.
East.
Oh, let's go in that way. Okay, sorry.
Maybe I should do this.
Well, it's, no, but let's just say
Other way.
top. Let's go back and just say top.
Because, well, but technically, this is, you look at it, this is north, and this is east, and this is west.
North is normally up.
Yeah, but
Flip it around on the screen, it's going the
You
other
got to do
way.
that, flip it 180.
that way is north.
Oh, but
Right?
when you look at maps, north is normally up.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it, but
I thought it was a projector thing.
So if those 4 lots were fed from the east, from a pressure zone in the east versus from the west,
well, it can't be. It's got to be both ends, because you got to grab both ends of the water main and put the zone in.
Some of the retrofitting that I think you've been discussing would be, there would be some valving
right?
somewhere in this subdivision if a future pressure zone happened.
Right.
to Isolate that pressure zone.
Right.
So theoretically, could you put that valving in now and kind of plan for it? Sure, but like Corey said, when does that happen? The water mains are in the terrace
Well-
partially for these type of reasons, water main breaks, but
Right, right. But the cost of putting it now in would be a lot lower than the cost of putting it in later as well, so.
Correct.
You get to choose your poison or
Yep.
weigh the costs, so.
Correct.
The water valves probably aren't going to be a big difference, but is there like a pressure gauge in there along with the
The pumps.
pumps? So he's not going to want to put the pumps in now.
Right, I understand
But the
that.
valving and the location for the pressure gauges, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to do some planning to figure out, do you serve this whole thing? Do you serve only, say, like the farthest right row of lots, the highest elevation lots? Where do you want to isolate that pressure zone?
Right.
The other thought that's been kind of running through my head is, as you retrofit, maybe there's more than these 4 lots that have had complaints. And so when you're looking to retrofit, maybe the location of the booster station is further down the hill, therefore bringing more lots into that future zone.
But if
I mean,
you
that-
already put it in, you're going to go where you're going.
Correct.
Yep.
And so when that property to the east develops and you put that eastern side booster station in, when you're then placing this western side booster station, it may be on that unnamed road serving just those 4 lots, but maybe there's a reason that 6 or 8 of those lots want to be in that new pressure zone.
So would there be two, did I understand something about 2 pressure?
Well, you have, so the elevated tank serves 1 pressure zone, correct? And so when you add a second pressure zone, either you put 1 booster pump in and then serve everything within that and it's the only way in, but typically we try to have redundancy, correct? So redundancy would allow water to come into that zone from at least 2 locations if for some reason that incoming side is down, that whole zone is not down. You're still able to serve it from the other booster station. So I guess when I'm envisioning this, there would be 2, one on the east and one on the west, into this zone. Brandon,
Typically, what you see, though, is the pump is pumping against something. So if there's water, if you have water running out the other end, which we always do, because we have the water flowing through the system in 2 directions or more, that pump, if it's pumping from the east to the west, it just pumps it back out and up Mud Lake Road. It needs something to stop it. So generally what you do is you have some type of pressure valves in the system that says, until the water hits this certain level, it's not flowing out.
Yeah, it's like a pressure relief valve.
So you have 1 pump in one side and pressure valves in all the other mains, and that holds that pressure in that one system until there's some condition that says release it.
Is there any kind of a reservoir or pressure tank or anything in these systems? Is it just done with pressure valves and release,
For something this small, typically, it's just a.
relief valves and pumps?
Correct, yeah.
And these pumps are just put underground in the street?
Usually. I think there's multiple, maybe, yeah, I think here they usually are in the ground.
That's the way we did 'em.
Well, not we here, though, right? We haven't done it here.
And I mean, this is probably one of the only areas for a long, long time that we'd even have to worry about it. I'm trying to think of anywhere high like this around the city.
I didn't even realize it was that high. You're cutting off 13 feet and you're still that high. Just think about if we ran that road over the top of it, at the elevation that it is. That would be a.
All right. So,
The arc grade on 26, which is the third lot down, is 895. So you're at a 43 pressure on that.
Right.
couldn't you just grade the whole top off a little bit more?
Well, and that certainly is one thing that we're going to look at, is that, these are preliminary grading plans that we put together. We've worked with a consulting grading contractor that's come in and given some input to our grading
Yeah.
contractor that's doing the design. So, yeah, ideally, if we can take off another couple of feet on those couple of lots, it would solve a lot of problems, and that certainly is the direction that we're going to give them and what they're going to look at. But we wanted, this is the first iteration of these plans to present to the board and to the city. And now, since this has been presented, we've actually brought a grading contractor to give us his input on what he's seen. And we're, clearly going to have another set of plans that comes in for review. And that is the direction that we've given them. See what you do about those couple of lots, because in a perfect world, let's get them where they don't need any type of assistance and be good. But, at least we presented something that could get individual booster stations, get to the PSI that's looking for without a master water booster station. Now we'll try to dial it back even further, where we just have the standard PSI with gravity.
We should probably have you talking there, because this is on YouTube, and people are just hearing dead silence. So,
there's a lot of dirt to lose here, is the issue that he's dealing with.
Yeah,
You're cutting that kind of
and that costs money.
elevation down, there's a lot of dirt to move. And so, every cubic yard costs him money, and he's trying to figure out what the costs are. We've been helping him a little bit by moving it into the street so that we can
Mhm.
build that up. But you still have a really steep slope on the far east edge of this development that you're going to have to deal with. And if it, so you're looking at, who's going to end up with that 13, 14, 15, 16 feet of rise in the backyard. So you're trying to, also, it's a nice feature, it's an environmental feature of the community already, that hill, and to cut it off is tough, so what works best?
Will final grading plans be submitted and approved before the final plat gets approved by the council?
Has to be.
Good.
Good. It'd be nice if those two lots weren't in the plan, I think.
So, my takeaway is the water pressure issue could be better. But if another subdivision comes into play and there needs to be upgrades, we'll make them pay for it. Or we'll
Yes,
do the
there-
upgrades later.
Whoever does that second phase is going to have to cover the cost of that improvement, because they're going to have a number of lots that aren't going to require the pressure zone, unless they can grade it all off. And if Corey comes back and says he's going to grade it off, I will be happier from a water standpoint. Even a street standpoint, it's not going to be bad. It'll be better.
Is there a possibility that if the grading is going to be too expensive, could those 4 lots be an outlot to be dealt with later?
I think he's already got I think this whole section right here is already kind of outlot. And yeah, they could probably, if you look at it, but
But there's a cost to that, too.
yeah, he wants to get as much cash out of the,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they teach you that in developer school.
I'm a graduate of that school. But you're right. That's why we really wanted to present a plan that we could get the system to the PSI that's needed with individual booster stations for a couple of lots. To take those lots offline and to deal with some of the other infrastructure costs and grading costs on the site comes somewhat cost prohibitive to actually do the development if you would take 4 additional lots offline with your cost per lot and then try to sell them for a lot for a price that we could market and sell in the city of Lake Mills. We've had some pretty good traction so far in Crestview and in Brookstone, and we have a pretty good understanding of what the price is per lot that the area can withstand. And we're a little concerned that if we take those 4 offline, we wouldn't be there.
Okay.
Any other questions or concern, Mark and Vicki?
So after this Public Works Board, this final plat goes to City Council? Or
goes to
where?
Plan Commission,
And, okay,
and it goes to City Council.
and the final grading has to be completed before the, okay.
Yeah, the way the motion's read is that we have to accept some form of the plan. So if you guys say that we have to have it to the grade, then that's what we're going to be looking for. If you say that you're satisfied with the private pumps, knowing that in the future, it's going to have to be done the other way. And that's the standard. If he comes back and it says, hey, I cut the grades down, we'll be happy with that, but we'll also accept the other one, and that's what it'll go to council. Council may have this exact same debate.
Now, at this point in time, as far as pumps in homes, the city's perspective is it meets the code, the requirements. Without those pumps, those are not city pumps, correct?
No, we're going to look at those as their city pumps. The question we'll ask is,
And why are we going to do that if it meets the code without those?
I think that I think that we would worry that viewing it the other way might be too hopeful. What I would think is our better option would be to say that the homeowner accepts the responsibility of maintaining this on their own as part of an agreement with the city, and see if that works. I'm not going to guarantee that works either.
Well, if it's a legal
But at
agreement,
least we can look at it.
if it's a legal agreement, the city attorney can
We
just
could-
say, hey,
We have plumbers that we have maintain stuff for us all over the city, cross
Yeah.
connections, those types of things. They sign a thing that says yes, and they do that. And Mark could be right, it might not be something that we have to worry about anyways, because it's legal and because they're doing it to get the additional pressure. Maybe that's the debate that we have, but my initial reaction is that we cover ourselves and say that they're ours and we're gonna require the homeowner through some type of an agreement to maintain it for us.
And what's the advantage of that versus, the city does not require pumps, the city's outlook on this is that pumps are not required.
Are the homeowners, to the homeowner's benefit for the homeowner, and when,
What's
because
the-
we meet the requirement at the street.
Right, so what's the disadvantage to that method?
It would be a question that we'd have to have a debate with the DNR on, because they're gonna, what's nominal, what's the standard, what's the expectation?
So is this
They're
gonna-
saying it never gets below 40 at this point, or if, under these conditions, it's at this point. Has anybody here had that debate with the DNR?
No, and I was just going to say that debate may be kind of forced because the development's going to have to submit a water main extension permit. And those permits come with fire flow test requirements, and I would think that the DNR would get clued into the fact that they're getting close to that 35 PSI, so they may weigh in kind of somewhat automatically. I can't say that for sure, but there is a permitting process here that still needs to happen.
Well, and if that does happen, I don't think the city should be on the hook for anything. That's, okay, the developer needs to deal with that DNR issue, or not, or PSE issue, whatever it is.
We don't put any cost into the initial construction, that's for sure.
Well, individual pumps that are owned by the city and maintained in the home is,
Not a good project,
not nice either.
at least in the long run.
are you okay with how this motion is written, or are you
It's-
amend it, or?
No, it's getting another look by the city council.
Okay,
He's on the city council.
all right.
I have one more question, maybe short, maybe long. How is this related to the next item on the agenda, the Mud Lake Road project? I assume we wouldn't be doing the Mud Lake Road project if not for this development.
That is correct.
And who's paying for the Mud Lake Road project?
When we get to that, we get there.
Well, it may affect us, this.
Yeah, it might affect this.
Oh.
The city has policies, so 50% of the water main and the sewer and the storm and the street from the start of the subdivision to the south end is the developers. The oversizing of anything is the city's cost. Anything on the west half, the city's picking up on behalf of the owners on the west side. Technically, it's being TID, so really Corey through the TID is picking up the west half too, for the west half. There are some parts of the construction that we're not doing at that point in time. So sidewalks on the west side are not being included at this point in time. nor a bike trail, theoretically. So those are some of the issues that are there. So when we look at this, the intersection improvements, so all the trees on the east side, the street trees, are Corey's. All the street trees on the west side are going to be left off until there is actually a development over there, same with the sidewalk. So it's kind of a split. Now, everything from his subdivision north to where Mud Lake Road ties into County Highway A and all those improvements, and all the improvements from on Topa Road up to 89, where the 80, actually where Dot leaves off this year, are TID. So
What else is in the TID besides this development?
the TID encompasses quite a large area. It's TID number 5, so it includes 1204 South Main Street, which is another project we're working on. It includes like Topals.
The area around Sandy Beach Road and South
And
Main.
north. So there's, I think it includes all the way over to Rotary Park on Sandy Beach Road. And
Is this the first time we're using TID for residential?
Yeah, it's got to be at least 50% non-residential, correct?
yes, this is the, that's that, this,
I was asking.
this TID is that type of development. It's a mixed use. We have
But is it
another
def-
mixed-use development. We looked at, when we did TID number 3, a large portion of that TID was proposed to go residential. We're still seeing some prospectus in that direction in the future. I don't think it's going to remain industrial any longer.
So we're using TID for road improvements and
That's what this,
paying for water?
well, TID is frequently used for road improvements.
Right, but in the past, we special assessed, we inherited township roads.
No,
Pine
we
Street-
didn't.
Pine Street
We
and,
used a large portion of TID number 2 to construct the sewer and water improvements that went to the Brookstone development. Now, they paid to go through it.
What time frame are you talking about for Brookstone?
Back in the 90s.
90s.
That was a TID?
There's
TID
no
number
TID.
2.
No.
Industrial park?
That was, the sewer main was special assessed. There was some sort of special assessment agreement with
There was a,
future development, if I recall. It wasn't TID.
Yeah, the development agreement dealt with what the developer for the residential lots was going to take care of. The TID improvements only covered the industrial park, part of Brookstone,
Brookstone and that TID were completely separate.
right,
in the residential portion,
right,
which is, this one is completely separate on the residential portion,
right.
too.
I feel uncomfortable with that because we special assessed Pine Street and Sandy Beach homeowners. It just seems to be a change in policy.
The policy that was set forth in TID number 5 said this is what was going to be done. And that was approved by the council. And as part of what the economic development process has been in this area, and that's why it was set up in this way, so 50% is allowed to be residential, and the project plans did state that in the original documents. So while we may not have done it exactly in this form before, it is allowed, and it has been approved by the council. And so I don't know that that's, the debate that we're having here. The debate we're having here is the construction, the proper style and method.
Right, but can we acknowledge that it's a change in policy that,
Right, there's probably, but TID number 5 does lay all that out, and and even the project plans in there went through that in detail. So,
So are the street improvements being paid for by the development or by the TID for
Both.
this plat?
this plat is all by the developer.
Okay.
Within the
Oh.
development.
All right,
But Mud Lake Road is half developer, half TID.
In-
Or some
in the
percentage-
section
some
where it-
percentage.
In the section where it runs past the development.
Right.
In the section where it's north of the development is all TID.
Right. And the Topol Street part of it is all TID.
Yes.
thanks, Vicki.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, there's a certain percentage, we're looking at a park, and so there's a certain percentage of real estate that's going to be this developer, and then there's a certain part that will be from other developers. The city may put up some money initially through some form to purchase a piece of real estate for a park in this area, and then, but those are all things that are, part of the developer's agreement as we go through it. But what we've structured so far is consistent with what we've historically done or what's in the TID plan. And
It's not the Public Works Board job to figure out how things are paid for. The Public Works Board job is to look at the technical infrastructure end of it. I understand that. I just want to take this opportunity for myself to express personally that I'm not a big fan of TIDs, especially when they involve residential development. That's just,
Well,
that doesn't, that doesn't,
we should have a discussion on the
it's-
Public
it-
Works Board ordinance, 'cause
it's really a city council decision, though, more so than Public Works Board decision. But I'm not thrilled about that direction that the city has gone more towards that in the last few years.
yeah, I'm not going to deny that. From an economically stimulated standpoint, and we can talk about housing and how it impacts the markets.
Yeah.
And
It's all, I understand, there's advantages to growth, there's advantages to,
Mark-
there's advantages
Mark,
to
would
that,
you
but
prefer an agenda item where we review
It's-
the Public Works Board ordinance? Because someone has actually already complained.
what ordinance? What Public Works Board ordinance?
The one that governs how we advise the council.
Oh.
Because it does, have you read it?
The Public Works Board ordinance?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with it.
So it does recommend street funding, right? A budget?
Yeah, budget.
So the issue is is TID part of that or not?
That's interesting.
So I think that should be a separate agenda item
That could be,
in a future meeting. So,
yeah.
are we all good on this motion? This is the final plat.
I'm a little bit uncomfortable with some of these sub-points that says things like, the financial guarantee is approved and appropriately filed, and the covenants are approved and appropriately filed. None of that stuff has happened. Maybe,
It's subject to the submission of those.
that's what it says. It says conditionally approved based on these occurring.
All of those items have to occur yet. What you're looking at is specifically the construction plans for the anticipated final plat.
But
okay,
That was my intent there.
the construction plans are conditionally approved based on the fact that all this other stuff has to happen. If it doesn't happen, the approval doesn't happen.
And the construction
Okay.
plans are approved by
It's your recommendation to the council.
that,
Well, the construction plans are generally, you say, if we, the engineer and I, and say that the construction plans meet city requirements based on this motion, it is
Right.
approved. With the financial guarantee, the city attorney generally goes through and makes sure that the financial guarantee is taken care of and all that stuff and appropriately filed. If that happens, if all these points fall into place as what we normally do, then this approval is good. If not, see, that's why it says conditionally.
yeah. So is that the building inspector who approves construction plans?
No, it's Brandon and I.
Brandon, so, yeah,
Yeah.
You guys have criteria, you got city ordinances and state
The
laws.
city has
Yeah,
specifications that we have to follow.
Right,
So if you look at every one of our set of construction plans that goes out every year, you're going to see what our construction standards are. If they don't meet those, we don't approve it. The out of the norm for this was the water.
right. So is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm set.
Okay. Well, I'll call the roll call vote then, Dan.
Do we have a motion on?
Yeah, we did. I made sure of that.
I don't have notes on who did that. Misty stepped up.
Ian made the motion.
Ian did, and I
Mark
seconded it.
No, Vicky seconded.
Oh, Vicky seconded it.
Okay, so are we ready for the roll call vote?
Yeah.
We'll go with Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt.
Aye.
Mr. Lair is absent.
All right. This is discussion only on Mud Lake Road. We've got plans. Obviously, can't be the way it is now.
True. You want me to go, Steve?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
So let's just back up. Could it stay the way it is now?
No,
Because,
because the current Mud Lake Road is not a city standard road. It's about 20 feet wide, asphalt, no curb and gutter, ditches. The second reason it can't really stay the way it is because the sanitary sewer grades coming south on State Highway 89 are too high, that if you continued that south along Mud Lake Road as it is now, you would come out of the ground, basically. So we need to raise Mud Lake Road to be able to provide gravity sewer to the subdivision and also keep the sewer within city right-of-way. To some degree, the road needs to be raised for stormwater reasons as well. That's partially that internally drained discussion that we had earlier, that if you left this road lower, it may be difficult to contain the water in a basin and not have it spill out over into the road. But the main reason for not allowing it to stay right now is sanitary sewer, and that the fact that it's just not a city standard street, and it is now in the city.
And its existing condition is substandard.
Correct.
Even the town of Lake Mills is looking at upgrading their portion. We don't have a standard that is a rural cross-section. All ours are urban. So we start at 34 feet back at curb, the back of curb, so we have curb, sidewalks, and that all ties into having the sanitary and the water and the stormwater and the sidewalks all tied into it. So could we leave it the way it is? We'd basically remove the whole road anyways and put it back in so we don't have a real cross-section. So we wouldn't leave the existing road in place.
So I guess I could just kind of summarize the project. The project on the north end will start where the State Highway 89 reconstruction stops. Will stop, it's due to be completed this spring. We're matching into their project limits. We'll grab onto the sanitary sewer and the water main where that project leaves off and continue those utilities south. And curb and gutter will be, the State Highway 89 project has curb and gutter at the south end of it. We will grab onto that curb and gutter, run it on County Highway A or Topol Street to the southwest a little bit. A major component of this project is we would be realigning the intersection of Mud Lake Road and Topol Street or County Highway A. Currently, it's at this kind of weird, like acute angle, and you're kind of coming up the hill to it. And just road intersections of those angles are just not advisable. And so the current plans have the new Mud Lake Road kind of swooping to the west and creating more of a standard T intersection. So that's a major change there. The roadway cross-section is up for some discussion, I suppose. In the information with the agenda today was included 2 potential typical sections for the Mud Lake Road. And then, so I guess as you go farther south, Mud Lake, the project would terminate at the south end of the proposed plat. I mentioned in the review memo for the plat that there may be some phasing. We haven't quite narrowed that down yet on if Mud Lake Road will be constructed all the way to the south end of the plat now, or if you'll cut it off at some point to serve, say, phase one of the proposed plat. There's a couple of, fairly easy break points that you could make with the Mud Lake Road project. I would say at a minimum, you're probably looking at constructing half to 2/3 of it, just so the new road would kind of match in well with the old road vertically. But some of the utilities and that kind of stuff could be easily phased. Steve, is that the one from the plan set or the separate?
I think that's the
document?
plan set.
Yeah, there was a separate one that. So the discussion on the typical section for Mud Lake Road is, the city's standard road section is 34 back to back of curb to back of curb, for residential kind of minor roadways. And Mud Lake Road really fits the description of that, although it does continue quite a ways south. The current land use around it and future land use, especially considering surrounding roadways like State Highway 89 just adjacent to it, this would not be anticipated to be a major collector or arterial anytime or ever in the future. If you're trying to go from north to south, you're probably going to take 89 versus wind your way through Mud Lake Road.
We talked about that a little bit last month.
Yeah. The only reason why you'd widen beyond 34 feet is in the long-range transportation plan, they had a bike path identified going south on Mud Lake Road. There is a campground down there. It's not a very large campground. I'm not quite sure how busy it gets. But that was the main reason in the long-range transportation plan, was to accommodate bikers from the south coming up into the city to, move around, eat.
You do know the bike station is also the official shower station for that campground.
The bike station?
The old railroad station?
Oh, no, I didn't know
The
that.
campground itself, I think it's this pit toilets. You were in Scouts, Mark.
Yeah, it's a pit
It
toilet.
has,
Yeah.
it has no modern facilities.
Yes, yes. So people do camp there to bring their bikes. And I met a lot of people on the bike trail that are staying there.
Okay, yeah.
So they needed a way to get to the old train station so they can have a decent shower.
Okay. So the city's typical cross-section, if you were to provide bike facilities on the roadway, is a 37 foot back-to-back, which would provide, if I remember right, there's two 11-foot lanes, a 5-foot bike lane on each side, one going north and south. The big issue with that, considering the proposed plat adjacent to this, is that that 5-foot bike lane would not allow parking on that side of the road, which we thought would be advisable to allow parking on that side of the road in front of the homes. The other aspect is the 34 back-to-back is a wide enough pavement section that, so 34 back of curb to back of curb, you have 5 feet of curb, so now you're at 29 feet, so you would have 14 and a half feet of pavement each side of a center line, that does meet standards for like a shared lane for bikes to use if you were to ride down just like kind of the edge of the roadway. It doesn't necessarily have to be marked, but it is wide enough that you should be able to have somebody biking along and somebody driving past them. So we just wanted to bring up the fact that the long-range transportation plan identifies a more official bike route going that far south. But in this case, with the proposed land use adjacent to it, we thought it might be better to have a 34-foot wide, more standard city cross-section, one, because it fits the minor roadway classification, it would still allow bicycles, and it's less expensive because it's 3 feet narrower. But, obviously that's not necessarily for us to decide, I suppose, just kind of laying out the options here. So that was the discussion on the typical section. As Steve talked about earlier, we were only going to install a standard 5-foot sidewalk on the east side of Mud Lake Road, and the future sidewalk would happen whenever development happens on the west side. All the stormwater from Mud Lake Road would be collected in underground storm sewer and sent north to that stormwater basin that the proposed subdivision is building. I think that would pretty well summarize what's happening. The total project length is about 1,500 feet on the Mud Lake Road, and if you go like from where you join the State Highway 89 project, it's about 1,700 or 1,800 feet north to south.
Can you tell me about sidewalk on Topol Street and South Main Street? I don't see anything on the south or east side.
Yeah. So we had not done any on the southeast side because there will not be any as part of the State Highway 89 project, kind of in that corner there where account.
So where does it end for the South Main Street project, the sidewalk on the east?
On the, let's see, what would be a good place to show that? It's on the north side of County Highway A.
Does this map help?
No.
No? Okay.
Oh, boy. What would be a good, I'm trying to find a good sheet to
Does it go-
illustrate it here.
Does it go to the bike trail?
Yes, it goes to the
Yes.
bike trail. It
Yep,
actually goes,
yep. Steve, can you go to sheet 17?
Which PDF document was that in?
The plans, the first one,
First time?
right? Yep.
So up on the north, like the upper right part of that page, the upper right part of that page is the terminus of the State Highway 89 project. I guess it can be, it's about Station 54 plus 50. On the curb lines of the proposed road, they go from kind of gray to black. So the gray is the end of the State Highway 89 project. So we would be grabbing onto their 5-foot sidewalk and running it south. Now, there has been some discussion recently, it's not shown on these plans, about turning that sidewalk into a potential, the start of a bike route that would go south. It would join up with the Glacial Drumlin Trail just north of there. It would provide you the opportunity to send that bike path farther south along County Highway A. The county is talking about building a park kind of in between where they're realigning County A and Mud Lake. That's not Mud Lake, it's like the kind of little marshy part on the south end of Rock Lake. So you would have the ability to send that there. You could also have that path cross County Highway A, kind of right at this intersection would be a good spot, and serve any future development, residential or otherwise, at the corner of Mud Lake Road and County Highway A, kind of where there's the Topol Farm right now.
so let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
On this one here, you can see where
Oh, there you go.
the
That's
bike
better.
trail is coming down, or the existing sidewalk, the new sidewalk is coming down. And there's actually an existing sidewalk there already, and they're just tying into it right at this point here. So this is what we would look at starting to replace down here. So you got kind of a plan that we're replacing it here, but then we're just bringing it across and running it down the east side of Mud Lake Road. We're not actually doing the west side. So that's the primary way the sidewalk's being proposed right now.
And I guess go back to your original question, Mark, if on this sheet, you can see that in the southeast corner, there's like a box that kind of outlines a house there. There is no sidewalk now or proposed as part of the 89 project, so there's nothing really to connect to there.
Right. Because this is joining off, the 89 project is providing a stub of Highway A or Topol Street, and that's what you're connecting to, and there's no sidewalk there.
They do have sidewalk as part of that stub, kind of on the west side of it,
Right, but not on the east.
not on the east, right?
And at the page, I assume this is page 17.
This is, the one I'm showing here is 16.
Oh,
16?
yeah. You show on page 17 sidewalk going past the crossover point, but through the intersection of Mud Lake Road, which probably isn't actually necessary since it doesn't actually go anywhere.
The sidewalk actually runs that far already.
If it's loose, you can loosely define it as sidewalk.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah,
It's rubble,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah,
you would have to search for it.
yeah. I
With a
went,
shovel, probably.
just because the Romans built a sidewalk there 1,000 years ago, it doesn't mean we have to put brand-new sidewalk there going to nowhere.
I thought this was Astalon sidewalk.
Actually, it may not go to nowhere, so we're being prepared. There's some discussion about how to use some of that real estate in the area, which might require sidewalk.
And as long as we're on sheet 17 here, I did not mention that we are keeping the sanitary sewer not only going down Mud Lake Road, but also extending past the new intersection with County Highway A, sanitary sewer and water to connect to those in the future to serve any future development down County Highway A to the south.
I think my only comment is the state park and camping area on Mud Lake. Because of that, I think there should be some sort of bicycle accommodation.
Yeah.
I guess to that point, when you say some sort of, are you thinking officially marked and designated versus
I
just
think most
having a
bikers are
roadway
smart enough to
section that's
know.
wide enough? Now, I will say the 34 is wide enough, but if you allow parking on one side, that would,
Our standard residential is 34 back curb to back curb. We do not designate any parking because most residential parking isn't substantial enough to create a problem. But we also, people bike those streets all the time without any issue. It's not like biking on 89 or County Highway V. So if you're looking at it and saying, this road's a significant upgrade, it's got plenty of width to be able to handle it, it's curbed and guttered, adequate stormwater, it should be a fine street for being able to handle.
There shouldn't be a whole lot of parking anyway, right?
No, most people are gonna be parking off the street. You're looking at that event where you're, like in any residential neighborhood where you're,
family Thanksgiving.
graduation,
Yeah. It's
wedding,
once or twice a year at most.
yeah. So it's like most standard neighborhoods, if you wanted to, we could put sharrows down. But typically a 34 back of curbed as a minor residential is more than adequate for most bike traffic. As long as the car traffic doesn't become too substantial.
Right, and that's, the minor residential and not too much car traffic is something that 50 years from now, I don't know.
Yeah, you're probably looking at what'll eventually be the County Highway A route and 89 as being the two main traffic routes.
Yeah.
Even in 50 years, I mean, CP Avenue.
If you have another 50 as more houses go in, the residents in those houses take the quickest route. And Mud Lake Road is a very straight road to the rest of Lake Mills.
Yeah, but if you had the other ones, they're dropping right down onto Highway 89. So it's going to be a pretty substantial split. And if you're looking at getting out to the south, they're all going to go over to 89.
Yeah.
Heading north, they might split equally. But that's an advantage. I mean, keeping people off of 89. But when CP Avenue opens up, the likelihood that there's more traffic moving further to the east quickly, the more routes that we provide, the less traffic that congregates on any one road.
Yeah, it's not through traffic, it's the
Locals.
locals that will as the city grows and this becomes a larger residential area. That's the part I'm concerned about.
So if we give them as many options as possible to move through the area,
Speed bumps on Mud Lake Road.
there will be a speed bump on the south end of Mud Lake Road.
One other thing we talked about, like, as part of the plat, trying to find the right page to show you, was the stormwater kind of overflow, if you want to call it that. So I'm thinking sheet 14, maybe, Steve? So on the west side or up on the page, we're showing a little 12-inch storm sewer that right at the Mud Lake Road and County A intersection, there's a low area by the existing farm buildings there that it will have nowhere to go.
So he's looking right here.
Yep. And so we were going to put a small storm sewer system there to drain that low area out into the south and southwest. And then by the manhole to the left, Steve, the small one, right? Yeah, a little bit further right there, right there. Out of the back of that inlet, we're proposing to send a pipe that would almost never see flow. That would be that overflow that if that kettle backed up all the way into the storm sewer underneath Mud Lake Road, that it would eventually hit that pipe, which is set high in the back of that inlet, and it would flow out into that lot to the south or the west and flow to the southwest. And then we also looked at some of the grading, for any future development and where that stormwater could go. And there is kind of like a route where you could envision maybe like a regional drainage swale kind of running through that parcel to the south and southwest in the future. So that pipe would not see or should not see any flow unless you get like a 100+ year storm. But I just thought it was worthy of mentioning that we're thinking about these large storm events that seem to be happening more often than they used to.
Every 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess any other questions?
No, it wasn't unexpected.
What's the next step for these plans, this project?
Well, I would say these are, somewhere around like a 60% completion level. Unless we hit some speed bump, we're hoping to bid this in March. So the next steps would be to just kind of full speed ahead with completing the design to a point where you can bid it.
There are speed bumps, though.
Yes, potentials, right?
Yes, there's a TID amendment and a developer's agreement and some property acquisition. So it's not like it's full speed ahead. It's kind of relatively thoughtful ahead.
Lots of things that need to fall into place.
I imagine people won't be able to get through, right? Just rebuild,
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
there'd have to be some sort of detour.
Yeah, so one aspect that I didn't really talk about is this, I don't know if you notice on the profile drawings, we were raising Mud Lake Road substantially. Some of it was like 8 feet. And so the fill for that is hopefully going to mostly come from the adjacent subdivision and that hill. We may be able to get some from the 89 project as well. It sure would be convenient for them to drive 300 yards and dump it on this project. So hopefully that will happen as well. But yeah, with the traffic control, that people would not be able to get through on Mud Lake Road. But that said, they can get out to the south.
Yeah.
This project doesn't even really front on anybody's property that's trying to get out onto Mud Lake Road, really. I mean,
I'm not
it's all
saying-
farm field basically on either side of it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a showstopper, but
Yeah.
It's a detour to 89,
Yeah.
right? To the next
Well,
access on 89.
Is it? I haven't gone out that way myself.
And if somebody's coming from the city, wanting to go to, say, that state park, and this is not open, or
Right.
all torn up, but still somewhat accessible, they'll probably want to go down 89 and,
Yeah, you'll go to County Highway G and then up the Mud Lake Road from that
yeah,
exit.
which isn't, it's not too far, is it?
Not by car, by bike it might be a dog.
All right, any more questions on this? All right, item 8, recommendations for future agendas. I think we briefly touched upon this. My issue is that any public works project outside the TID district goes through us with a recommendation and has to be approved by the council at a public hearing. And geographically, if you look at geographical map, more than half the city's under a TID. Is that correct? If you open up the TID map, I mean.
No, we're locked down to a percentage.
Third or a
So it's
quarter.
not a-
Well,
I don't know what it
it's-
is, but
Yeah. So that's my concern, that there's just not enough public awareness of what's going on in these TIDs because it's centralized at the council level without any recommendation.
But the project plan is all approved, so I don't know why it needs to come back to the Public Works Board.
I'm talking about like funding, I mean,
Well, the
But
project
it's
plan
TID
also
funding, so
talks
Yeah,
about
but-
what the project's going to be.
and TIDs go through multiple public hearings. So it's not like there's any value in adding more.
well, do you want a discussion on it, Mark? I mean, if I'm the only one, I don't want it on the agenda. Okay, that you ponder that?
yeah, oh,
If you decide you want an agenda, just send an email.
I'm leaning no, because almost all these decisions at the Public Works Board are recommendations to the city council.
Right.
And so, the city council has very good visibility of TIDs. And, no matter what you do, most people in the city are not going to pay attention to what goes on in city government.
Okay. So,
Yeah, it's,
all right.
it's just really, if the city council wants to do the way that it's being done, that's fine. It's their choice, and the voters get to decide if that's the right choice or not. But I just wanted, maybe somebody in TV land will hear what I said and think about it and make some noise.
No, that's fine. I don't have a person to second any motion I would have made if it was the agenda, so
Yeah,
I'm not going to lose sleep over it and be angry, so. All right, any other recommendations for future agendas?
Jefferson Street,
Oh, you gonna rebuild that, or?
yes, with TID dollars.
good old $2.
I've said what I said, and I have no backup, so
But we are looking at designing Jefferson Street for a
Right.
project, and
that was not unexpected anyway. I think that came up during some other street project.
it was,
I think-
obviously Jefferson Street's getting kind of old.
Yeah,
And it has a rural cross-section within the
It's a rural
city.
cross-section.
yeah, and
We can't have that now, can we?
and during sidewalks,
You want to hand it down here, Brandon, if you want to?
well, sure. I mean, I was going to ask you if I got the scope on this right later, but you can throw it up there. I mean, I was doing what I thought would maybe be good project limits and stuff, but.
what's this?
Jefferson Street.
Oh, well, are we getting in the discussion phase?
We're not discussing it.
Oh, okay.
So
Hey, flip it
this is the
around.
project that we're looking at, and
See if you get it.
Okay.
it's
North.
exactly the way it is on the real world.
Oh. Well, you
How
can't
you
read
turn
any
it
of
around, it's the opposite
Can't
direction,
read
maybe
any.
north, but
Yeah, that's true, but the text is up now. I don't know.
the, PID number 3 incorporates this as a project. PID number 3 has a number of years left in its expenditure category, and probably the most significant generator of TID dollars is Chapter 2. So the upgrading and improving of Jefferson Street would substantially, I shouldn't say substantially, but will benefit Chapter 2. And so, and not to mention that this was one of the haul routes this year, and so the road probably saw a lot of heavy traffic. And so upgrading that roadway for, at this point in time with those dollars is an advantage both to the TID providers and the city as a whole.
Well, do we want to put it on an agenda?
That's what I was saying. That's what we're planning on doing, is putting it on an agenda.
Yeah, so then let's save it for the agenda. I want to go home, I don't
That's it.
feel
Yeah, that's what I
good.
was thinking. All right, well, yep, that's it. Jefferson is the only one, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting.